She handed him a burner phone in the rain and whispered, "If you want the truth, come find me." Then she disappeared into the crowd. And he stood there, a man who had once made entire syndicates disappear, completely frozen, because the little girl standing next to her had a birthmark on her face. The exact same birthmark he had been told 7 years ago he would never pass on to anyone, because he could never have children. He was wrong, and someone made sure he believed that lie. If you're new here, this channel tells stories that will rearrange something inside your chest. Stories about love that costs too much, betrayal that wears a loyal face, and the kind of grief that gets manufactured by people you trusted. Subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment below telling us what you think happens next, because this one is going to hurt before it heals. Min Jun Choi was the kind of man that rooms adjusted for. Not because he announced himself, not because he was loud or cruel or performed his danger for an audience. He simply entered a space, and the space quietly reorganized itself around him. Conversations lowered a register. Men who had never seen him before moved slightly to the side of the hallway. Bartenders made his drink without being asked. He had never needed to explain what he was. The world could read it in the economy of how he moved, in the particular stillness of his eyes, in the way he carried 7 years of retired violence like a coat he could put back on at any moment. He was 41 years old, and he had been pretending to be a civilian for 7 of those years. The pretending was not without effort. He had a consulting role at a legitimate security firm in Yongsan-gu that asked no questions about his resume and paid him a salary that was a fraction of what he used to earn and still more money than most people he knew would see in 3 years. He had an apartment that was clean and sparse and contained no photographs except one. He had a jazz bar on Itaewon-aro where the bartender knew his drink was a single glass of 15-year scotch, no ice, and the unspoken agreement was that nobody in that bar would ever say his name out loud. He had built a life that fit around his grief the way furniture fits around a hole in the floor. You arrange things carefully. You make it functional. You never look directly at the hole. The grief had 2 parts, and he had learned to carry them separately. The first part was Mag Stones, a Black American woman from Greensboro, North Carolina, who had come to Seoul 6 years before he met her on a teaching contract and stayed because Seoul felt like a city that could hold the size of who she was becoming. He had met her at a gallery opening. He was there as a courtesy to a business contact. She was there because she was genuinely interested in the work. And she had looked at him across a room full of people who were afraid of him and said, with the particular directness of a woman who had decided early in life that she had no time to waste being indirect, "You look like a man who hasn't laughed at anything in a while. Is it a choice or an accident?" He had laughed, right there, before he could stop himself. And that was the beginning of the most significant thing that had ever happened to him, which would also become the most significant loss. She left 7 years ago without a word, without a note, without a reason he could examine and argue with. He had people look for 2 years, capable, motivated people who were very good at finding things that did not want to be found. They found nothing. Eventually, he accepted what the silence meant. She had loved him, and then she had assessed the complete cost of loving him, and she had decided the price was too high. He didn't blame her. He had stood in enough rooms where the price was too high to pretend he didn't understand the arithmetic. The second part of the grief was the thing the doctor had told him 8 months after she disappeared. He had been 26 days out of a hospital bed after the Incheon warehouse fight, a fight that had left him with a blade wound that caught him low and internal damage that his body had cataloged in pain he still remembered precisely. When a doctor sat across from him in an off-books consultation room and delivered a verdict in the careful language of men who have learned to sound sorry about bad news. The damage was significant. The prognosis, in all medical likelihood, was permanent. He would not be able to father children. He had nodded. He had thanked the doctor. He had gone home and sat in a dark apartment for 2 days without turning on a single light. And the thing that undid him most completely was not the diagnosis itself, but the understanding that arrived alongside it. That there was no longer any version of the future he was building that required him to be a different kind of man. He had always told himself, somewhere underneath everything, that he would eventually find a reason to clean his hands. Children would have been that reason. Without children, he had no reason. So he stayed. And then Mag left. And then the doctor's verdict arrived. And between those three things, he had assembled the life he was currently living. Functional, controlled, carefully arranged around what was missing. He kept one photograph. Mag at the Han River, laughing at something off camera, her locks pulled back from her face, the autumn skyline positioned behind her like the city was trying to frame her. He had taken the photo himself. He transferred it from jacket to jacket every morning without thinking about it. The way a man touches a scar he stopped noticing years ago, but cannot bring himself to ignore entirely. This is who walked into Syndrome Station on a Thursday morning in October. The platform was Seoul rush hour. 1,000 bodies performing the daily choreography of the commute with the efficiency of people who have done it 10,000 times and stopped seeing each other doing it. Min-jun moved through the crowd the way he moved through every space, reading exits, reading bodies, reading angles. Not because he was threatened, but because 7 years of retirement had not touched the instinct. Vigilance was structural at this point. It was just how he processed the world. He almost didn't see them. The woman was ahead of him by 8 meters, navigating the crowd with a backpack on one shoulder and a small girl on her other side. The child's hand held in hers with the practiced grip of a mother who has performed this exact movement 500 mornings in a row. The woman was wearing a camel coat he didn't recognize. Her locks were shorter than he remembered. Her posture had changed. More contained, more deliberate, the posture of a person who had spent years calibrating how much space she was allowed to take up and had decided, this much and no more. He recognized the posture before he recognized the woman, because he had learned it from the same years that taught him his own. The name arrived not as a thought, but as something that happened to his chest. Not a word, a physical event. A fist closing around something behind his sternum. He stopped walking. Someone behind him bumped into his shoulder and muttered an apology he did not process. Muh! She hadn't seen him. She was looking down at the girl, saying something close to her ear, steering her toward the open train doors with the practiced ease of a woman who had made this particular version of the world work through sheer force of consistency. The girl looked up at her, nodded, looked forward, and the crowd shifted, and the angle opened, and Min-jun saw the girl's face. The birthmark was on her left cheek. Jagged, asymmetric, the particular shape that his mother used to trace with her finger when he was small and call our family signature. The mark that appeared in the one surviving photograph of his grandmother. The mark that he himself carried on his left collarbone, hidden now by his jacket, invisible to everyone in this crowd, known only to the handful of people in his life who had been close enough to see it. It was not a common mark. It was not the kind of mark that appeared twice in strangers. The train doors closed. He was on the platform. They were on the train. Through the window, in the 3 seconds before the train pulled away from the station and took with it the most important thing he had seen in 7 years. Mag looked up. Some instinct. Some disturbance in the peripheral field that she had been carrying unconsciously for 7 years. The sense of being found. Her eyes moved through the glass with the precision of a woman who had spent 7 years scanning crowd from the corner of her eye, hoping she wouldn't find what she was looking for. She found it. She found him. The train moved. He stood on the platform while Seoul rush hour continued to flow around him like water around a stone, and he watched the train disappear into the tunnel, and he did not move for a very long time. A cleaning attendant walked past him twice before finally asking if he was all right. He said yes. He walked out of the station. He sat in his car for 14 minutes without starting the engine. Then he drove home. He did not go to the jazz bar. He went to the apartment, poured a drink, sat at the kitchen table in the orange city dark that came through the windows from the street, and stared at the glass without touching it. His mind kept returning not to Mag's face, but to the girl's face. The specific geography of it. The shape of the eyes, which were Mag's eyes. The set of the jaw, which was his own jaw on a face that had not yet learned how to hold it still. The way the girl tilted her chin at a slight upward angle that 3 different people, at 3 different points in his life, had told Min-jun was an affectation he was probably not aware of. And the mark that had been in his bloodline for 3 generations. At midnight, he got up from the kitchen table and went to the bedroom and opened the second drawer of his dresser and found the document beneath two folded shirts. The document he had not looked at in 4 years, that he had stopped looking at because the grief of looking at it was a thing he had learned to seal. He carried it back to the kitchen and read it in the city light. 3 pages. The doctor's language was precise and, in memory, careful. A man delivering a verdict he seemed genuinely sorry about. In all medical likelihood. He read that phrase again. He had read it before and heard certainty. He read it now and heard a door that was never fully closed. He put the document down. He went to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror with the light on and looked at his own face. The face he had known for 41 years. The face that had run a criminal syndicate and survived a blade fight and learned to be small and quiet and controlled over 7 years of deliberate practice. He looked at his own face and thought about the girl on the train. The angle of the chin, the set of the jaw, the mark on her cheek. He turned off the light and went back to the kitchen and sat down. He did not sleep. By the time the October sun came through his windows and turned the apartment from orange to gray to pale yellow, he had made a decision he was going to spend the next 5 days pretending he hadn't made. He found magstones in 4 days. 4 days was slower than he would have managed 7 years ago and considerably faster than a man who genuinely meant to let something go. He was aware of both of these facts and chose not to examine either of them too closely. He found her through a contact at the Immigration Bureau, a favor called in carefully, the kind that doesn't get written down, and through her employment record at a hagwon in Mapogu that offered English conversation classes every morning and afternoon, 5 days a week. He found her neighborhood, her building, the Pojamaka 3 streets, over where the owner apparently knew her order. He did not go to her immediately. He sat across the street from her building for 2 evenings and watched the 4th-floor windows and told himself he was confirming, making sure, being rational, being the kind of man who verifies before he acts, which was a man he had always been, professionally, and was currently failing to be personally with spectacular comprehensiveness. On the 3rd evening, he got out of the car and crossed the street and rang her buzzer. She opened the door like a woman who had been expecting this knock for 6 years and had still found no satisfactory way to prepare for it. She looked at him. He looked at her. The hallway between them contained 7 years of everything that had never been said, and neither of them reached for any of it immediately. Seo Yun is asleep, she said. Her voice was careful. Her Greensboro vowels had softened slightly at the edges after years of teaching Korean students to hear the difference between sounds their language didn't make. But they were still hers, still present, still the voice that used to reach across a dark room and find him. Komin, don't wake her. He came in. The apartment was small and warm and covered in the particular evidence of a child who was living her life in it fully. Drawings held to the refrigerator with fruit-shaped magnets, small sneakers by the door with the Velcro straps done up wrong on one of them, a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye propped on the couch like it was waiting for someone to come home. He stood in the middle of this apartment and looked at all of it with the expression of a man walking through a room he had been told would never exist. Mag stood in her kitchen with her arms crossed and her jaw set and her eyes doing the thing they had always done, measuring, deciding, staying exactly 2 steps ahead. She did not offer him a seat. She did not offer him anything. She watched him take in the apartment, and she watched his face take in what it meant, and she gave him nothing to work with. You saw us on the train, she said. Yes. I saw you see her. Yes. A silence between them that had weight. He broke it first because he was trying, in this apartment with a one-eyed rabbit on the couch, to be a different version of himself than the one who had run a criminal organization for 15 years. Tell me why you left, he said. And his voice was quiet, genuinely quiet, not the controlled quiet he used when he wanted someone to understand they should be afraid. Just quiet. Not about the train. Not about where you've been. Tell me why. Mag looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that landed on him like a change in temperature. I was going to leave anyway. She said it directly, making sure he heard both words equally. Before I knew I was pregnant. I want you to understand that. I wasn't running because of the baby. I was already going. She paused. The baby changed what running looked like. Not whether I ran. The silence that followed this was different from the first one. The first one had been the silence of two people who hadn't seen each other in 7 years. This one was the silence of a man being told that the story he had been telling himself, that she left because she was afraid, was only partially true. She had left because she had looked at him clearly and made a clear-eyed decision. I spent a year watching, she said. Watching your world come closer. Watching the way you stopped flinching at things that should still make a person flinch. You couldn't see it. That was the part that scared me most. You had adapted to it so completely that you'd lost the ability to see it happening. She paused. There was a night. You came home with someone else's blood on your jacket, and you were bothered about the jacket. He was quiet. Not the blood, she said. The jacket. I remember that night, he said. I know you do. You told me it was fine, and you believe it was fine. That's when I knew I had to go. She met his eyes and held them. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later, and I knew what you would do if I told you. You would have built a fortress around us. You would have called it love, and maybe it would have been love. I never once doubted that you loved me. But I didn't want my daughter growing up in a fortress, Minjun. I didn't want her learning that love and surveillance are the same thing. That safety is just fear with a better marketing department. He almost laughed. He caught it, but she saw it. Did you just almost laugh at your own heartbreak? She said. You said marketing department. I teach teenagers. I've learned to make things memorable. The almost laugh faded. He looked at his hands on her kitchen table. She's mine, he said. Not a question. Mag held his gaze. Yes. The mark. I noticed it the day she was born. I didn't understand it at first. I'd never seen yours. But after I left, I found photographs. Old press coverage. She looks like you, Minjun. A pause. She looks like you in a way that I couldn't have hidden if I tried. He looked toward the hallway. The closed door at the end of it. From behind it, the sound of a child breathing in sleep. Deep and steady and entirely unaware of the conversation happening 20 feet away that was rebuilding the architecture of the world around her. I was told I couldn't have children, he said. Mag went very still. After Incheon, the blade fight, the doctor told me there was damage. That in all likelihood, he stopped. Started again with less pretense of composure. I spent 7 years believing I was the end of my line. Part of why I left the life was, what was the point of building anything clean? There was no one to build it for. He looked at her. You need to know that. I wasn't given the chance to make a different choice. Someone took that from me. Mag said, very quietly, I know. He went still. What do you mean you know? She uncrossed her arms. She went to the bedroom and came back with a laptop. She opened it and set it on the kitchen table between them and said, sit down. This is going to take a few minutes. And I need you to not flip the table when you hear it. He sat down. I have never flipped a table. You broke a window once. That was structural. The window was in the way. The window was just a window, Minjun. Sit down and tell me what you know. She had been looking quietly, carefully, for 3 months before she left. Not with his resources. She had looked the way a woman looks when she is trying to understand something dangerous without alerting the danger to the fact that she is looking. She had followed small threads. She had been careful in the way that women who grew up navigating hostile spaces learn to be careful, leaving no record, disturbing no surface, watching from the margins. She had found the doctor, or rather, she had found what was behind the doctor. The doctor who treated Minjun after the Incheon fight had been recommended by Park Dae-ho, Minjun's consigliere. Arenaud Bidae-ho. Dae-ho had been present at the initial consultation in a way that, at the time, had read as loyalty. The loyal second staying close during the boss's medical recovery, making sure the right people were in the right rooms. Mag had found the doctor's license. She had found his payment records. 8 years of private retainer, paid through a shell company that traced back, through 2 layers of financial misdirection, to Dae-ho's personal accounts. I found this 3 months before I left, she said, watching his face across the table. I didn't know exactly what it meant yet. I just knew something was wrong. By the time I understood what I was looking at, she stopped. I was already pregnant. I was already gone. And coming back meant coming back to all of it. Coming back meant handing Dae-ho a reason to do something worse. Minjun was looking at the screen. His face had gone very still. Not the stillness of a man who was blank, but the stillness of a man who was very full and choosing, with great deliberate effort, to contain it. He told me I couldn't have children, Min Jun said. I know. He arranged that. That's what the records say. He sat with me. His voice was completely level, which, if you knew Min Jun, was the most frightening thing it could have been. He sat with me in that consultation room, and he watched a man he had paid tell me that I was sterile, and then he drove me home, and he stayed for 2 hours, and he stopped. He breathed. He told me to rest. He said everything would be fine. Mag said nothing. She let him have the silence. Why? He said finally. Not to her. To himself. But she answered. Because you were the most dangerous man in Seoul, and you had no heir, she said. No family. No one to build a future for outside the organization. That meant everything you were was the organization. The moment you had a child, a real reason to protect something the syndicate couldn't contain or manage, you become a completely different kind of threat. Unpredictable. Impossible to hold. She paused. A man without children is a man who can be managed. A man with a child is a man who will burn everything down to protect her. Daeho understood that. He made a calculation. Min Jun looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, with a quietness that had weight, he made a calculation about my life. Yes, about my daughter. She existed by the time he found out. He knew within a year of her birth. Something moved through him. Not across his face. He had too much control for that. But through him. She saw it in the way his hands adjusted their position on the table. A millimeter. The smallest recalibration. He knew. Min Jun said. Yes. For 6 years. Yes. And you've been here. In this city. This whole time. Where was I going to go? She said. It came out quieter than she intended. I had nothing, Min Jun. No family here. No safety net. A daughter who was starting to look more like you every month. I built what I could build. I made it work. She looked at him steadily. And before you say anything about the danger, I was careful. I stayed invisible. Mapogu is not a neighborhood anyone from your world would look for me in. I found you in 4 days. You knew what to look for. Daeho would have known what to look for. She held his gaze. Yes, which is why I've been careful every day for 6 years. A pause, and why I've been waiting for something to change. For some moment when the math shifted. When bringing you in would protect her more than it risked her. And the train was that moment. The train was the universe, deciding I'd waited long enough, she said. Yes. He sat back. He looked at the ceiling for a moment with the expression of a man taking inventory of everything he thought he knew about his own history and finding the shelves reorganized. Then he looked at the hallway. The closed door. She's 6, he said. 6.5. She will correct you if you say just 6. Despite everything, despite the rage that was quietly reorganizing itself into something colder and more directed in the back of his chest, he almost smiled again. She sounds like you. She is nothing like me, Mag said. She is terrifyingly like you, which has been, I want you to know, a very interesting parenting experience. How so? She told her kindergarten teacher, very calmly, that the reading exercise was inefficient and suggested a different methodology. She was 5. This time he did laugh. A short, real sound, unexpected in this kitchen with the weight of everything that had just been laid on the table between them. That's horrifying. Yes, she's also brilliant and kind, and she has your stubbornness and my mouth, and she's the best thing that exists. Mag said it simply, without performance. A statement of fact. She's also going to have questions. When she meets you, more questions than you're ready for. He looked at her. When she meets me, Mag held his gaze. We go slow. That's not a suggestion. The lightness in the room, the small, unexpected lightness that had arrived with the story about the kindergarten teacher, shifted. They were back at the table, back at the real conversation. And Min Jun leaned forward and said, I'd like to be here, to be present, whatever that looks like. Whatever pace. That's not your decision to make, Mag said. His jaw tightened slightly. She's my daughter. She is. And she's been my daughter for 6 years without any input from you. I didn't know. I know you didn't know. Her voice was steady. Not angry, steady. The steadiness of a woman who has been the only ground beneath a child's feet for 6 years and knows exactly how much weight that is. That doesn't change what I said. You don't get to show up and close a 6-year gap with good intentions and a paternity instinct. He stood up. He needed to stand. He was trying not to. He was trying to be different in this apartment, trying to be the version of himself that was possible rather than the version that had always operated by deciding what he wanted and arranging the world accordingly. But he needed to be standing. I'm not trying to claim anything, he said. I'm trying to ask. You're trying to ask me to let a 6-year-old who has never met you start building a relationship with a man who ran a criminal organization for 15 years, she said. And I'm telling you, yes, potentially, eventually, but on her timeline and mine, not yours. That's the ask. Can you live with that? The silence between them stretched. You know what the hardest part was? Mag said, and her voice was different now. Quieter, the carefully held composure shifting just slightly. When she was born, I looked at her face, and she looked exactly like you. Your eyes, your jaw, that mark. And my first thought, the very first thought I had in that hospital room, alone, was that I'd brought you with me. That I tried to leave, and you were already there, in her face, waiting for me. He said nothing. He could feel the cost of this coming through the air between them before she finished saying it. I wasn't angry at her, Mag said clearly. I need you to understand that. Not for 1 second. But I sat in that hospital room by myself, and I looked at my daughter's face, and I grieved you all over again. Completely. From the beginning. A pause. So, when you tell me you didn't get a choice, I know. And you're right. But I sat alone in a hospital room, and I grieved the man I loved while holding the proof that I loved him. So we both lost something here. Let's not rank the losses. The apartment was very quiet. He sat back down. He put both hands flat on the table. He looked at them for a moment. Then he looked at her. You're right, he said. She blinked. What? You're right. About all of it. He met her eyes. I wasn't there. There's no version of this where I argue around that. The reason you were alone in that hospital room is because of what I was. And I'm not going to sit in your kitchen and defend what I was. A pause. I'm just asking you to believe that I'm asking. Not claiming. Asking. Mag looked at him for a very long time with the forensic attention of a woman who has spent 6 years being the only person standing between her daughter and everything that could go wrong. She asks about you, she said finally. He went completely still. Not often, but she asks. She wants to know what you look like. I show her photographs, sometimes. Old ones. Mag looked at her hands. She's going to have questions when she meets you that I can't answer. She's going to ask why. And I need you to tell her the truth. Not a version of the truth. The truth. Even the parts about what I was. Especially those parts. She's 6. She's 6.5, Mag said. And she's going to understand more than you think. She paused. She already understands more than I thought. She told me 3 months ago that she thought her father must be someone important because I got a complicated face whenever she asked. She looked up. Those were her exact words. Complicated face. Complicated face, he repeated. I told her complicated face just meant I was thinking. She believed you? Mach scheint. No. She patted my hand and said, It's okay. Mama, you can tell me when you're ready. She was 6 years and 2 months old. He was quiet for a moment. She sounds terrifying. She is absolutely terrifying, and I am so proud of her it makes me dizzy, Mag said. And for the first time in this conversation, something entirely unguarded moved across her face. Not performed, not managed. Just the face a woman makes when she talks about something she loves without reservation. She's going to take one look at you and decide in about 40 seconds whether you're worth her time. And if she decides I'm not, then you spend however long it takes changing her mind. Mag looked at him. The same way you'd spend it with me. He nodded. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to actually understand, not just say yes so we can move past the conversation. I understand, he said again. It's slow. She leads. Whatever she's ready for, when she's ready for it. Not me. And Min June. Her voice shifted, got quieter and harder at the same time, the way a voice gets when it is carrying something serious without wanting to perform it. If anything from your old life touches her, anything, I will disappear so completely that not even you will find us. I don't care what it costs. He held her gaze. I know, which is why I need 3 days. 3 days for what? To make sure your old life has no interest in touching her either, he said. And that was when the phone in his jacket pocket began to ring. He looked at the screen. He looked at Mag. He answered it. You should come see me, said Park Dae-ho. His voice was warm. It had always been warm. It was the warmest voice Min-jun had ever heard on a genuinely dangerous man, and he had spent 30 years mistaking that warmth for loyalty. For old times. Where? Min-jun said. Incheon, the waterfront office. He knew the office. It was where the blade had caught him. It was where everything that had come after had begun. The fight. The doctor. The verdict. The 7 years. I'll be there, he said, and ended the call. Mag was watching him. She had the expression of a woman who had just heard a chess piece move on a board she couldn't fully see. He knows, she said. He's known for 2 days. Probably since the transit authority camera caught me on the platform. He stood. He has people there. How many? He almost smiled. Not enough. Min-yoon. Go somewhere that isn't here tonight, he said. Take Seo-yun. Your neighbors, a hotel, anywhere. Don't tell me where. I'll contact you when it's done. When what is done, the thing that makes it so nothing for my old life can ever reach her. He picked up his jacket. I made 3 calls before I came here tonight. From a phone Dae-ho doesn't know about. He looked at her. I told you I needed 3 days. I may need fewer. You planned for this. I've been planning for this since I sat in that station and watched the train take you away from me again. He held her gaze. I wasn't going to find you and leave any of this standing. The waterfront office in Incheon was a legitimate import business on the harbor that had been a syndicate front for 20 years. It smelled of salt water and old timber and the particular metallic undertone that Min-jun associated with rooms where consequential things happened. He had sat behind the desk in that room many times. It was someone else's desk now. Park Dae-ho was 60 years old and looked, as he always had, like a man who had aged into authority rather than merely into age. He was behind the desk, Min-jun's old desk, with his jacket buttoned and his expression composed and the particular bearing of a man who has decided in advance how this conversation will go. There were 2 men by the door, one in the hallway, one watching the waterfront entrance. Min-jun had counted all 4 on the way in. You look well, Dae-ho said. You look like a man who's been waiting for a phone call, Min-jun said. A beat. Then Dae-ho almost smiled. The warmth of it, even now, knowing what he knew, was extraordinary. The man was genuinely gifted. Seat. Min-yoon said. He looked at the desk between them and allowed himself, for exactly 1 second, to feel the full weight of 30 years. Then he put it away. You found her, Dae-ho said. Yes. And the girl. Yes. Dae-ho set his glass down. He was quiet for a moment with the patience of a man assembling an argument he had been preparing for years, waiting for the specific moment to deploy it. I want you to understand something, he said. What I did, the doctor, the arrangement, I did it for the organization, for the thing you built. You were becoming distracted. She was a distraction, a foreign woman with no stake in what we'd built, no reason to stay if things went difficult. She stayed, Min-jun said. 7 years. In this city, raising my daughter alone. That is not someone who lacks staying power. Dae-ho was quiet. You told me I couldn't have children, Min-jun said. He said it the way he said everything right now. Very quietly, very completely. You sat in that room with me, and you let a man you paid tell me that something was broken in me that was not broken. And then you drove me home, and you stayed 2 hours. And you talked to me about the organization, about next steps, about how to focus, and the whole time, he stopped. He breathed. The whole time you knew. I did what had to be done. You made a decision about my life. I made a decision about the organization's future. You made a decision about my daughter. Min-jun's voice did not change in volume or texture. It remained completely level, which was, if you had spent 30 years knowing him, the clearest possible signal that something irrevocable was coming. She has the mark, Dae-ho. My family's mark. The mark that's been in my bloodline for 3 generations. On her face. You knew. You've known for 6 years. And you said nothing. Dae-ho looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in his expression. Not guilt, not quite, but recognition. The acknowledgement of a cost he had classified as theoretical and was finding out, in this room, was not theoretical at all. You were always going to be the end of yourself, he said, and there was something almost genuine in it. I was trying to prevent that. No, Min Jun said. You were trying to prevent an heir. Because an heir meant I had something to build toward that wasn't you. And a boss who's building towards something else is a boss who leaves, Daeho said. Yes, which is exactly what you did. I left with nothing, Min Jun said. You made sure of it. You left with your life. You left me with a hole in it that you dug and covered over and watched me fall into for 7 years. He leaned forward just slightly, and you let me believe it was natural, that it was just what happened. The blade, the damage, the medical likelihood. He shook his head. You were very good. I'll give you that. You were very, very good. Daeho had the grace not to thank him. What happens now? Now you pick up that phone, Min Jun said, and you make 3 calls. To the same 3 people I called earlier tonight from a number you don't know. And you tell them everything. The accounts, the arrangements, the leverages, the names. Everything. He placed a phone on the desk between them. In exchange for that, you spend several years in a cell, which is not what you deserve, but it's what I'm prepared to offer. And if I don't, Min Jun looked at him with the eyes of a man who had spent 7 years practicing smallness and found out in the last 72 hours that he had never actually become small. He had just been waiting for a reason to stop pretending. Then you find out what I'm like when I'm not pretending to be retired. Daeho looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the phone. Then he said, almost quietly, almost to himself, she looks like you. The girl. I've seen photographs. I know. I told myself it didn't matter. That the organization mattered more. I know what you told yourself. Were you going to kill me? Daeho said, when you came in here tonight. Was that the plan? The plan was always the phone, Min Jun said. Killing you doesn't clean anything. It just makes noise. He paused. But I want you to understand something, Daeho. The 4 men you put in and around this building tonight, they're not going to be a problem. I made sure of that on my way in. Which means right now, it's just you and me and that phone. And I have been waiting 7 years for a reason to stop being patient. Daeho picked up the phone. This is the part where you're screaming at your screen. This is the part where you need to comment right now. Right now. And tell us what you felt when Daeho picked up that phone. Was it relief? Was it rage that it wasn't more? Drop it below. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Hit the button. This story is not done yet. What happened over the next 4 hours in that waterfront office was not chaos. It was not fury unleashed. It was the particular, methodical work of a man who had spent 30 years building a criminal infrastructure and now spent 4 hours helping 3 law enforcement contacts dismantle it with the completeness of a person who knows where every load-bearing wall is and exactly what to cut first. Daeho, Tolkid, Min-yoon confirmed. The people on the other end of the phone asked questions, and Daeho answered them. And Min Jun sat across the desk and watched the face of the man who had stolen 7 years from him and understood, with a clarity that had nothing theatrical about it, that he felt more like himself in this room than he had in all the careful constructed smallness of his 7-year retirement. Not because he wanted the life back. He didn't. He was done with the life. But because he had stopped pretending he wasn't who he was. And there was a kind of relief in that which he hadn't expected. At 4 a.m., he walked out of the waterfront office and stood on the harbor with the October cold coming off the water and called a number on a phone Daeho had never known existed. Mag answered on the second ring. Well, it's done. A silence. All of it. Enough of it. The parts that could reach her. He looked at the water. Where are you? Hotel. Mapo-gu. Seo-yun is asleep on the other bed. A pause. She asked me why we were at a hotel. I told her it was an adventure. She said hotels are not adventures. They're just houses you pay more for. A pause. She's not wrong. He exhaled something that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a breath. Can I meet you tomorrow? At the apartment? Wherever you want. A silence. He could hear her thinking from across the city. Han River, she said finally. The park near Mapo Bridge. Noon. Bring. She stopped. What? Nothing. Just come. Another pause. She's going to see you tomorrow. The weight of that settled on him like something physical. Does she know? She knows I'm going to introduce her to someone. A pause. She asked if it was her father. He was very still. What did you tell her? I told her maybe, Mag said. And she thought about it for about 4 seconds, and then she said, okay, and went back to sleep. Another pause, and her voice was doing something complicated that she was trying to keep controlled. I don't know whether that's resilience or whether she's been expecting it so long that it felt normal. She's been expecting it? She's 6.5 years old, and she's the most observant human being I have ever met in my life, Mag said. She has known something was happening since the moment I changed her bedtime and packed a bag and called it an adventure. She's been watching me have this conversation for years. She just hadn't met the other participant yet. A long pause. Be on time tomorrow. I'm always on time. You were 4 minutes late every single time we had a date for 2 years. I was never late. I was building anticipation. Silence. Then, very quietly, go home, Min-jun. He went home. He did not sleep. He sat in his apartment with the light on for the first time in 7 years. Just the light on, ordinary and unremarkable, illuminating his own furniture, his own walls. And he stayed awake with the feeling of a man who is standing at the edge of the largest thing that has ever been available to him, trying to make sure he is the right size for it. He was not sure he was the right size for it. He was going to show up anyway. The Han River in late October was wide and silver and cold enough that the breath of anyone standing near it made small clouds that dissolved almost immediately into the morning air. The park near Mapo Bridge had a railing along the water and a broad walking path and clusters of people moving in the particular unhurried rhythm of a weekend morning. Older couples, cyclists, a man flying a kite that kept losing the wind. Mag was already there when he arrived. She was at the railing with her coat buttoned to the collar, watching the river, her locks pulled back in the same way they had been in the photograph he had been carrying in his jacket for 7 years. Standing slightly apart from her, looking at the water with her hands gripping the railing and her feet on the lower bar, was a small girl in a yellow coat. Min-jun stopped on the path. He stood there for a moment before either of them looked up. He had needed this 1 second, this single second of seeing them from a distance, of understanding the complete shape of what had been happening in the world while he was in his apartment, being carefully small. A woman who had built a life out of nothing in a foreign city. A girl who had grown up entirely without him and had apparently managed to become, by all accounts, already more herself than most adults achieved in a lifetime. Seo-yun turned around first. She turned from the railing and looked directly at him with the particular forensic attention of a child who had decided this was an important moment and was going to gather every available piece of data. She was small for 6. She had Mag's mouth, wide and mobile and slightly skeptical even in repose, and she had his eyes and his jaw and the mark on her left cheek that caught the October light the same way it had caught the light through a train window, jagged and asymmetric and unmistakably his. She did not smile. She did not wave. She stood on the walking path and looked at him and assembled her verdict. Mag turned around. She met his eyes over the top of Seo-yun's head and gave him absolutely nothing to work with, which he understood was exactly right. This was not her moment to manage. She stepped back slightly, giving the space between him and Seo-yun room to breathe. He walked forward until he was a few feet away and stopped. He did not crouch down. He did not manage her with a performance of gentleness. He stood at his own height and let her look. "You're tall," she said. "Yes." She considered this. "Mama said you were tall. Your mother has an accurate memory." Seo-yun looked at him for another moment. Then she pointed at his collarbone, at the place where his jacket collar didn't quite cover the mark. "You have one too," she said. "Ido." She reached up and touched her own cheek with 2 fingers, feeling the mark that had been there her whole life. "Mama says it's from our family." "That's right. Your family," she said, working it out as she said it, the logic of it audible. "So, they came from you to me." "Yes." She absorbed this with an expression of intense, serious thought. Then she looked up at him with his own eyes, which was still the strangest thing he had ever experienced, and he did not think he would ever entirely get used to it. And she said, without anger, without performance, with the devastating clarity of a child asking a genuine question. Why didn't you come before? The park continued around them. The man with the kite tried again for the wind. A cyclist rang a bell. He crouched down. Finally, not to manage her, to be level with the question, to give it the respect it deserved. I didn't know you existed, he said. I know that sounds impossible, but I didn't know. Someone made sure I didn't know. And when I found out, he met her eyes. I came. She looked at him for a long, considering moment. Who made sure? Someone who was supposed to be on my side. Like a bad friend? Something like that, yes. Mama says those are the worst kind, she said. Because you don't see them coming. Your mother is right about most things. Seo-yun turned to look at Mag with an expression that clearly communicated. Asterisk, he said you were right about things. Please log this. Asterisk, then she turned back to him. Are you going to stay? She said. And here was the place where he could have promised. Where a man, trying to be impressive, might have said yes without qualification. Yes completely. Yes forever. He looked at his daughter's face, at his own eyes looking back at him from Mag's face with Mag's particular quality of seeing exactly what was in front of her. And he said the true thing. I'm going to show up, he said. Every time I'm supposed to. For as long as it takes. He paused. But that's up to you. And your mother. Whether staying is something that gets to happen. That's not my decision. Seo-yun looked at him for another moment. Then she looked at Mag again. And she looked back at him. Okay, she said, and turned back to the railing to watch the river. He stood up. He walked to the railing and stood beside Mag. They watched Seo-yun peer over the edge at the water below, investigating it with the complete absorption of someone who intended to understand how rivers worked. The silence between them was different from every silence that had come before. It was not the silence of grief. It was not the silence of confrontation. It was the silence of two people standing in the same place at the same time who have not yet determined what that means, but have decided to find out. She's testing you, Mag said quietly, looking at the water. I know. She'll keep doing it. I know. She'll ask the same questions 17 different ways until she believes the answer. She sounds exhausting. She is magnificent, Mag said. And then, quietly, helplessly, she asked me last week if love was something you chose or something that happened to you. What did you tell her? I told her it was both, and that the hard part was figuring out which part was which. A pause. She told me that was a very complicated answer. I said yes. She said good. Simple answers are usually wrong. He was quiet for a moment. She's 6. 6.5. She's going to be a problem. She's going to be extraordinary, Mag said. She already is. She glanced at him sideways. You're going to have to figure out how to be her father without trying to run her like an organization. I don't run people like an organization. You absolutely run people like an organization. He stopped. Thought about it genuinely. That's fair. She will not respond to command structures. Noted. Or hierarchy. Also noted. Or strategic patience deployed as a management tool. I'm just preparing you. I appreciate it. He looked at the river. I'm prepared to be entirely unprepared. Something shifted in the air beside him. He couldn't see her face because she was looking at the water, but he heard it in the quality of her breath, the small, surprised exhale of a woman who had not expected to be disarmed at this particular moment by this particular man. That's the most honest thing you've said today, she said. I've been fairly honest today. You've been strategic today. That was honest. She paused. There's a difference. He let that sit. She was right. She was almost always right about the things that mattered, which had been one of the things he loved about her, and also one of the things that had made him certain, on the worst nights of the last 7 years, that the silence of her absence was not an accident. Silence from someone who saw that clearly was not a thing that happened by mistake. Seo-yun had abandoned the railing and was now crouched at the edge of the path, examining something on the ground. A beetle. It looked like, moving slowly across the concrete with what appeared to be great personal confidence. She crouched over it with the full focus of scientific inquiry. She's going to ask you again, Mag said, still watching the river. Not today, but she'll ask why you didn't come. She'll ask what you were. She'll ask things I don't know how to answer for you. I'll answer them. Honestly, yes, even when they're hard, especially then. He paused. Children can tell. Mag turned to look at him. The first direct look since the park, long and full and measuring. Yes, she said. They can. A moment. We go slow, she said. As slow as you need. I'm serious, Min-yoon. I need you to mean that. Not just hear it and say it back. I mean it. He held her gaze. I've waited 7 years for a version of this conversation. I can wait for whatever comes next. She looked at him for another long moment. The forensic look. The look that was still deciding. The look that might be deciding for years. Then she looked back at Seo-yun and the beetle, and something in her face did the thing that faces do when a person decides to allow something they've been holding at a careful distance. Not resolution. Not forgiveness exactly. Not the erasure of 7 years. Something more like a door open 1 inch. Enough for light. She asked me what you looked like, Mag said quietly. 6 months ago. I showed her a photograph, and she looked at it for a long time, and then she said, she stopped. Half smiled, just slightly, in a way that meant the memory was one of the ones that hurt and didn't hurt at the same time. She said, he looks like he's thinking about something important. Or something sad. It's hard to tell which. He was quiet. I told him maybe both, Mag said. He looked at his daughter, at the mark on her cheek catching the October light, at his own eyes and her face looking at a beetle with his own quality of absolute, undivided focus. And he felt something that he did not have a precise word for settle into his chest and stay there. Not triumph. Not relief. Not the satisfying completion of a mission. Something quieter and heavier and more permanent than any of those things. A man had been told he was the end of his line. He had been told wrong. And somewhere in the 7 years between that lie and this park, a 6-year-old girl had grown into herself without him and become someone who asked whether love was chosen or happened, and who told her kindergarten teacher that the reading exercise was inefficient, and who could look at a man she had never met and see in 40 seconds whether he was thinking about something important or something sad. He was going to spend the rest of his life being worth what she had just decided to extend to him. He didn't know yet if he was the right size for it. He was going to show up anyway. Every time. Until she decided. Seo-yun looked up from the beetle. She looked at him. She looked at Mag. She looked back at the beetle. Then she stood up and walked to the railing and climbed the lower bar and looked out at the river again, apparently satisfied with both the beetle investigation and with whatever she had decided about the man standing at the railing next to her mother. After a moment, she said, without looking at either of them, in the conversational tone of someone making a minor administrative announcement, the beetle was going toward the water. I moved it. Good thinking, Min-jun said. It didn't know it was going toward the water, she said. It just thought it was going forward. He looked at her profile. The mark. The jaw. The eyes that would not be still. That happens, he said. I know, she said. That's why someone has to pay attention. And she looked at the river. And he stood beside Mag at the railing in the October cold and paid attention. If this story moves something in you, if Seo-yun's beetle speech just rearranged something in your chest the way it did to us when we wrote it, then you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Subscribe right now. Hit the bell. Leave a comment below telling us the moment this story got you. Was it the train? The hospital room? Why didn't you come before? Tell us. Because the best part of telling stories is finding out which part found you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the end. And thank you for being the kind of person who stays until the end. We will see you in the next one.